All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for being here. As Patrick said, I'm Jenny Palmer. I am a policy associate on the Children and Families team. And for the last few years, I have spent a lot of my time following legislative activity around childcare and the early care and education workforce. This past year, been mostly working at home, of course, like many of you, and have been very close to my own children under the age of 6, my own early learners, I should say, including my 1-year-old here who was born in the pandemic. And I've had really a front row seat to all of the change and the growth that happens month to month, year to year in the early years. I see a lot of familiar names here, so I know a lot of you already know so much about the science behind early childhood development. You probably already know that those first 3 years of life are, the brain is developing at a faster point than any time later in life at the pace of about 1 million new neural connections a second. So what that means is neurons or nerve cells are part of the brain's basic architecture, and they allow different parts of the brain here to communicate with another. So here's baby Cameron and his neurons rapidly developing. You can sort of think of those neurons as telephone poles and the neural connections as the wires connecting each pole together. And every day in an infant or toddler's life, as they're taking in the world around them, they're interacting with their caregivers, they're developing millions upon millions of those connections. I know a lot of you on the line also already know that the growth of those neural connections is important, but also the refinement of those pathways as we get older. So you can see here these images, this period of great proliferation of those neural connections in the first few months through the first few years are happening, but also the brain's adapting, and those pathways that get used the most are getting stronger, and those that are unused or underused start to become weaker in a process called pruning. And now this is necessary. This is a really important part of brain development because it helps to make our brains more efficient. It helps to strengthen those parts, those pathways that we need to use more often. Just as a gardener, prunes away extra leaves or wilted flowers to make room for more blooming and flourishing parts of the plant, so does our brain. So you can see here the difference between the 2-year-old and the adult. You can see there's a little bit less density in our adult neural pathways compared to the 2-year-old, but some of those pathways are a little bit thicker, they're a little bit stronger. So what does all this mean for early learning? Well, these pathways that form in the earliest years lay the foundation for the more complex pathways that build on top. You've probably heard the phrase that brains are built from the bottom up. So as this graph illustrates, there's this huge growth spurt in the early years on these basic pathways around vision, hearing, language, communication, that will be absolutely necessary for the more complex skills and pathways that we need later on, like reading and for writing. So we can imagine then that without these strong neural pathways in these basic areas in the early years, what that might mean as we get older, as a child gets older and enters kindergarten or first grade, and when they're beginning to learn to read and add on all these additional skills. So what can we do to support early learning and early development? I feel like you all know the answer to this, but of course, this whole process of rapid growth and pruning is influenced by genetics, but also very strongly influenced by our relationships with caregivers. And that extends, from parents, of course, to grandparents, other family members, but also to caregivers outside the home. So that includes childcare providers, professionals within in-home settings, center-based settings. It extends to teachers within pre-kindergarten and early elementary school classrooms. Those nurturing and stable, responsive caregiving relationships are essential for supporting all of this brain development. And research shows that when children have access to those relationships within high quality early learning settings, they are more ready for school, they reap a whole host of benefits, better long-term health, more likely to graduate, less likely to have criminal activity, higher earnings later on in life, and so on. And for you all as policymakers, we know it's most importance or of high importance that these long-term benefits really converge into this high return on investment. So This image is from the Nobel laureate and economist James Heckman, whose research on early childhood programs shows a 13% return on investment, but other studies suggest, a return of somewhere between $2 and $7 for every $1 invested. So for you as policymakers, if supporting early learning is important to you and to your state, then understanding the strengths and the challenges of the workforce, the folks who are providing all that care and education, is really essential. And we hope that that's why you're here. High quality early learning means high quality early educators. So it's sort of like that theme song from the 90s show, what's it called? Married with Children, right? So love and marriage, you can't have one without the other. So you can't have high quality early learning without high quality early educators. We're really glad that you have chosen to spend these next couple of hours with us. You're going to hear from a lot of very smart and folks who spend a lot of time on this, researchers, administrators, as well as some folks from the higher ed world. Later on in this series, though, we would really like you to hear directly from the early educators themselves. So look for some information on a panel with early educators later on this summer. For right now, let's bring them in a little bit here. We're going to show a video to really bring in the voice of the early educators. This is a video created in partnership by an organization called New America, as well as the Center for the Study of Childcare Employment, who will have some representation on one of our panels later. And it really nicely captures some of those challenges and strengths that I mentioned earlier. So with that.
My name is Quinnetta Lewis. I am director of a single classroom preschool in the heart of West Oakland. I remember when I first got out of school, they were like, well, what are you gonna do with this nice degree you have? And I'm like, I wanna go work in West Oakland. And it's mainly because I feel like these children need more, and they need to have dedicated people to help them.
See over here? That's a walking sign. You see two people over here?
What we found in a study that we commissioned with UC Berkeley is that not only are teachers worried about paying their bills, but many of our teachers are actually just worried about putting food on the table for their own families.
75% of early childhood center-based teachers in the U.S. earn less than $15 an hour. Mind you, that more than a third have bachelor's degrees.
They might drive for like Uber in the afternoon. They're working side jobs, and then they're still trying to do work that they have to do here.
So many times we're asking teachers to be psychologists and janitors and family navigators.
And now we're asking people to do assessments and fill out forms, and we keep kind of adding more things we want teachers to do.
There's a lot of turnover, and teachers don't stay as long, and we know that has a negative impact on the children.
But I'm trying to figure out how we did it before we did. Oh, here it is. I do have it, yeah. At least half the teachers, they're being supervised by another teacher.
So Sequel is a survey tool that we developed here at the center, and it's really designed to capture the voice and perspective of teaching staff.
It looks at teacher well-being, and it really provides information about teacher well-being. They together sort of assess their work environment in 5 different ways.
So, we're able to make these linkages between teacher well-being and quality of programs that children are in. This information is then used to inform quality improvement, to help us think about policies.
If you can't document the status quo, then you can't really challenge it. And people are beginning to understand these are the things that are really preventing them from moving quality.
Go ahead. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Singing on the rock. 13, 14. Singing on the rock.
Beautiful. Give Alex a big hand.
You know, one of the challenges, I think, of working with young children is how people perceive what you're doing as being unskilled, something anybody can do, and so there's a real lack of respect.
Now, where are you going to put the doll?
I'm keeping together.
Oh, okay.
And the dog.
It's seen as the children are just playing. And how we say, yes, they're playing, and when they're playing, they're learning. Their learning is their work, and we're guiding them in their work called play. And so the teachers who come along have to be skilled. And now in our workforce, more than ever, we're requiring that we have at least a bachelor's degree.
What teachers of young children need is adequate compensation. They need to feel like they have input on the decisions that are made that affect children, and they really need to also have some self-determination in choosing what kind of professional development path they choose.
This issue of teacher pay and teacher working conditions is not some abstract or irrelevant thing. It is front and center to the ability of teachers to function in a professional way and to engage in professional practice.
Like, why do we stay? We stay because we love it, but it's been at a sacrifice. That's why I work in leadership now, saying we got to change this, and we got to keep speaking, but we have to put action to it.
I don't want to see scribbling. You guys are going to kindergarten. You should be able to draw your shapes.
For a lot of the children who come here, this is like oasis, like some place where they can come and feel happy. And that's one of the big things I can say that the teachers and myself, we say I love you a lot around here. And we give them a lot of love and a lot of hugs, and because that's what they need, along with giving them an education. Yeah, sorry. I always get really emotional because I love being here with them, but it's just really hard because I have my family to think about also.
Okay, well, I hope taking a peek into the early learning classroom was beneficial to you. I know I always really love starting there in these types of gatherings. So thank you again for being here. I'm going to hand things over to my friend and colleague, Jorge.